I understand your dissatisfaction, sir, but I will not tolerate being spoken to that way.
I'll speak however I like. Just bring me the manager. I don't care for your attitude. You're just a waitress. Stay in your lane.
Sir, there is no need to be rude. I am trying to help you. Finally. What took you so long?
Apologies for the wait, sir.
Honestly, I don't know why they let you people work here.
The customer is clearly taunting Jada, fitting the prompt's description of the confrontation and...
Honestly, your attitude is exactly what I'd expect. I'll be speaking to your manager.
Go right ahead.
I don't care what your excuse is. I want to see the manager.
It just makes me so angry. I shouldn't have to put up with this.
You don't.
We'll report him together.
The clink of silverware rang through the empty restaurant, a soft contrast of the tension in the air. Jada stood at the counter, her uniform crisp, her posture straight, trying to avoid the gaze of the man sitting by the window. His suit was crisp, his smug smile more like a sneer as he looked at her, a black woman, an anomaly to him, or perhaps just a lesser servant in his eyes. He leaned back in his chair, flicking his wrist with exaggerated precision. His voice, loud and mocking, carried across the room as he addressed her, the tip of his tongue curling with disdain. Tell me, do they teach you how to smile like that, or is it just for the rich guys like me? His laugh followed, loud and sharp, like the rattle of chains. Jada's face remained impassive, though her knuckles whitened on the coffee pot she held. She forced herself to swallow the rising bile in her throat, her eyes not daring to meet his, lest she show him how deeply his words cut. Then, as she set the pot down, a fraction too hard on the counter, the room seemed to freeze. The man's smile faltered, just for a moment. The waitress before him was no longer the one he could mock. She met his gaze then, and there was something new, something unspoken, something that said she had reached her limit. A flicker of doubt crossed his face, but it was too late for him to take it back. Jada's hands were steady as she placed the silverware on the table, the clink of the utensils cutting through the quiet hum of the restaurant. The dim lighting of the evening had settled in, casting long shadows across the wooden floors of the upscale diner. It was a place where people came to escape their ordinary lives for a moment, to pretend that class distinctions didn't matter. But Jada knew better. She had been working here for over 2 years, and in that time, she had come to understand the dance. The way customers smiled at her when they were pleased, and the way they looked right past her when they were not. It was a performance she had perfected, being invisible when needed, stepping into the spotlight when asked. The smiles were always polite, but always tinged with something else. Tonight was no different, until he walked in, a man in his late 40s, tall and well-groomed, with a navy blue suit that looked like it had never seen a wrinkle. His eyes scanned the room as he entered, a glint of superiority in his gaze as he made his way to the window booth. His every move was deliberate, confident, as if he were the center of the universe. Jada approached the table with her usual polite smile, holding the menu in her hands. She had seen him before, but she had never served him. He had always come in with a group of people, loud, obnoxious, a little too comfortable for someone who should have known better. "Good evening, sir. Can I get you started with something to drink?" she asked, her voice smooth, practiced. He glanced up from the menu, but instead of responding with the usual water or coffee, he let his gaze linger on her a moment too long. A flicker of something passed behind his eyes, something that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. "Tell me," he said, his voice low and almost mocking, "do you always smile like that? Or is it just for the rich guys like me?" Jada froze. It wasn't the first time she had heard something like this, but it stung in a way that felt different. She wasn't sure why. Maybe it was a fact that he said it so casually, like she was a prop in his life, an object to be dealt with as he saw fit. Her stomach churned, but she pushed the feeling down, forcing the mask of politeness to stay in place. She had learned long ago to smile through this kind of thing, to bear the weight of people like him without letting it show. "I'm just here to take care of you, sir," she said, keeping her tone neutral, though her grip on the notepad tightened slightly. He chuckled, but it was more like a sneer. "Right, take care of me. That's cute. I wonder if they teach you how to smile like that, or if it just comes naturally. Jada clenched her jaw, but she didn't respond. She had learned that silence was often the best response to people like him. But her mind was racing. The words were just another small cut, another reminder of the casual racism that was woven into every aspect of her life. She wasn't just a waitress here. She was a black woman in a space where people like him believed they were entitled to treat her however they wished. She forced herself to focus, to keep the professionalism in place. She had a job to do. "I'll get you a drink, sir," she said, turning away before he could say anything else. As she walked back to the counter, her chest felt tight and her throat burned with unshed words. She had endured this before, this subtle, insidious racism that reared its ugly head in small ways. But today, for some reason, it felt heavier. She could feel his eyes on her, and for the first time, she wondered if anyone had ever truly seen her. Not as a waitress, not as a person who existed for their convenience, but as someone who deserved respect, someone who could fight back. She grabbed a glass of water and returned to his table. He hadn't taken his eyes off her. "Here you go," she said, setting it down in front of him. Her hands were steady, but inside, she was seething. He flashed that same smirk at her, like a predator eyeing its prey. "You know, you could be a little more enthusiastic about your job, but I guess I shouldn't expect much from someone like you." Jada felt a flash of anger rise in her chest, but she swallowed it down. This was his world, not hers. She was just a small part of it, a cog in the machine, meant to serve and disappear. But she didn't have to take this. Not anymore. As she turned to leave, she felt the weight of his gaze like a physical presence, boring into her back. For a moment, she hesitated, her heart pounding. There was something inside her, something primal, telling her to turn around and say something, anything, to confront him, to make him see her, to make him understand that she wasn't just some person to be humiliated for his amusement. But she didn't. Not yet. As she walked away, the words of her mother echoed in her mind. "Pick your battles, Jada. You can't change the world by shouting at it, but you can make a difference by showing them who you really are." She took a deep breath, reminding herself to let it go. For now, at least. But the spark inside her was there, and it was growing. The rest of the shift passed in a blur of quiet interactions and forced smiles. Jada's mind replayed the conversation with the customer over and over, each time the sting of his words sharper. She had been trained for moments like this, trained to swallow her pride, to keep her composure, but this time felt different. The man's voice echoed in her head. "People like you." It was the same phrase, the same underlying sentiment she had heard countless times. But today, it felt like a slap, something raw and personal. Something that made her question everything she'd been taught about how to survive in this world. Was this the way it was supposed to be? Was she supposed to simply endure, to take his casual mockery as part of the job? She tried to focus on the work at hand. She smiled and nodded at customers, took their orders, refilled drinks, did everything she was supposed to do. But each time she crossed the room, each time she passed the table where the man sat, a weight pressed on her chest. She could feel his eyes on her, watching every move, as though he were waiting for her to slip up, waiting for her to give him more ammunition. When the man finally finished his meal and paid the bill, he tossed a few bills on the table, barely acknowledging her as she came to collect the check. His casual dismissal felt like a punch in the gut, and she had to force herself to take a steady breath before bending to pick up the money. As she walked to the back to clock out, her steps felt heavier with each passing second. The weight of his words, of his gaze, seemed to follow her even as she left the dining area. She walked into the break room, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead, and stood for a moment at the counter, her back pressed against the cool surface. Her reflection in the window made her look like a stranger, a woman caught between two worlds, the one she was born into and the one she was expected to quietly accept. She closed her eyes and let the silence wrap around her, trying to push away the thoughts, the emotions that threatened to consume her. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the feeling that the world was closing in on her. "Hey!" A voice broke through her thoughts. Jada turned to see Maria standing at the door of the break room, her face drawn, her usual upbeat demeanor replaced with something softer. "You okay?" Maria asked, taking a few steps closer. Jada forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Yeah, I'm fine. Just tired, you know? Maria didn't buy it. She walked over and leaned against the counter, folding her arms across her chest. That guy again. Oh. Jada nodded, sighing as she ran a hand through her hair. I'm used to it, you know? The comments, the looks, it's just part of the job. But today it felt different. Maria's expression softened, her eyes scanning Jada's face as though she were trying to read something that wasn't being said. What did he say? Jada shook her head, the words rising in her throat before she could stop them. He told me I was lucky to be serving him, that I should be grateful for his tips. He asked me if I was taught how to smile like that, like I'm some performance. He didn't even see me. He didn't see anyone behind this uniform. There was a pause before Maria spoke, her voice low and careful. You know what? I'm tired of it too. I'm tired of letting them walk all over us like we're invisible. But what can we do, right? We can't lose our jobs. We need the money. We need this place. Jada nodded, the familiar weight of those words settling over her again. She had heard it countless times. Don't rock the boat. Stay quiet, and it'll be over soon. She had lived her life by that code, swallowing every insult, every slur, with the same practiced grace she used to deliver a plate of food. But it was getting harder to smile, harder to pretend that it didn't eat at her from the inside. I get it, Jada said, her voice soft but edged with something else. But I don't know how much longer I can do this, Maria. It's like they expect us to just bend, to just take it. And I'm tired of taking it. Maria sighed, pushing herself off the counter and walking over to the vending machine. She pressed a button and grabbed a bag of chips, her movement slow, deliberate. I know, it's not fair, but we don't have the luxury of speaking out. Jada, if we do, we'll lose everything. Jada closed her eyes, swallowing the lump in her throat. She didn't want to hear it. She didn't want to hear about the reality of the system that had been built to keep people like her in their place, silent, subjugated, ignored. She had grown up knowing that her voice didn't matter. But there was something inside her now, something that screamed to be heard. I'm not sure I care anymore, Jada said quietly, her voice full of a determination she hadn't known was there before. I can't just keep letting it slide. I can't keep being invisible. Maria looked at her, her gaze searching. Then, after a long silence, she nodded slowly. You're right. You know, maybe we do need to start saying something. But I don't know what that looks like. Jada, I don't know if it's worth the risk. Jada didn't have an answer. She didn't know what would happen if she did speak out, if she did stand up and tell that man, tell anyone who crossed the line, that she wasn't just a face behind the counter, a smiling, silent servant. But there was a quiet rage inside her now, something that couldn't be contained. The sound of footsteps in the hall pulled Jada out of her thoughts. She looked at Maria, and without a word, she grabbed her purse and headed for the back door. Tonight, she had nothing more to say, but she knew something was shifting inside her. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like it was a shift she could control. Jada's shift was a blur of motions, serving drinks, wiping down tables, and enduring the usual microaggressions that came with the job. But today, every moment felt stretched, each word from the customers more insufferable than the last. The man who had taunted her the day before had left, but his presence lingered in the back of her mind. The taunts and the glances, the idea that she was less than him, it stayed with her like a scar she couldn't stop touching. During a rare quiet moment, Jada slipped into the back office, her hands sore from the constant work. She needed a moment to breathe, to process the tight knot in her chest. The hum of the fluorescent lights above seemed louder than usual, a sharp reminder that she was still here, still just trying to survive. Maria appeared a few moments later, pushing the door open with a soft creak. She had noticed Jada's absence and, like always, had come to check in. Hey, Maria said softly, her voice full of concern. She leaned against the counter, her arms crossed loosely, and gave Jada a sympathetic look. You good? Jada looked up from the counter where she was staring absently at her reflection in the stainless steel fridge door. For a moment, she didn't speak. The words felt stuck in her throat. The urge to unload everything she had been feeling, the frustration, The anger, the disappointment, was almost overwhelming, but she didn't know how to say it without feeling like she was about to break down. "I don't know," Jada finally said, her voice low. "It's like everything I do is just not enough. And no matter how hard I work, no matter how much I smile and pretend, they still see me as less than them. Yesterday, it felt so obvious, like he just looked through me like I was invisible, and it's like everyone else does too." Maria stood there for a moment, taking in Jada's words. Then she sighed, her face softening. She stepped forward and sat down on the small chair beside Jada, her fingers tracing the edge of the table. "I know," Maria said, her voice quiet but full of understanding. "I've had my share of those customers. You know the ones who think they can talk down to you, who think they can say whatever they want because we're just here to serve them." She paused, biting her lip. "But you can't let it get to you. You've got to keep your head down, Jada. It's just how it is, you know? We have to survive. And if we don't put up with it, we're the ones who pay the price." Jada nodded, her eyes fixed on the floor, unable to look Maria in the eye. She had heard those words before. Keep your head down. Don't make waves. Just take it for now. They were the same words she had been raised on, the same advice she had internalized to survive in a world that was built to keep her quiet. But something in her had shifted. It wasn't that she didn't understand Maria's point. She did. But the cost of staying silent was becoming unbearable. It felt like suffocating under the weight of other people's expectations, living as though she was invisible just so others could be comfortable. "Don't you get tired of it, Maria?" Jada asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Don't you get tired of pretending that everything is fine when it's not? I know it's easier to just go along with it. But how long can we keep doing that? How long can we stay invisible?" Maria's face softened as she watched Jada, her expression torn. She shifted in her seat, clearly thinking about her response. She had known Jada for over a year now, and she knew how strong she was beneath the surface. But she also knew the price of standing up against the system. "I get it, Jada. Trust me, I do. I've thought about speaking up, about calling out the bullshit. But every time I've thought about it, I've asked myself, what good would it do? I'm just one person. They just replace me with someone else, and the cycle keeps going. That's just the way it is." Maria sighed, looking down at her hands. "But you're different. You're not afraid to say what everyone else is too scared to say." Jada's breath hitched at the weight of Maria's words. The truth was, she had never really allowed herself to think about the consequences of speaking up. She had just done what was necessary to survive, to keep her job, to keep her place in the world. But now, in this quiet moment with Maria, something inside her was waking up, a part of her that had been dormant for far too long. "I'm not afraid anymore, Maria," Jada said, her voice firmer than it had been all day. "I'm tired of being quiet. I'm tired of pretending that everything's okay when it's not. And I'm not going to let them keep walking all over me, not anymore." Maria looked at her, and for the first time, Jada saw a flicker of something else in her eyes. Hope. A small, tentative hope, like a light in the dark. "I'm with you," Maria said quietly. "Whatever you need." Jada nodded slowly, the weight in her chest feeling lighter now. It was still there, the fear, the doubt, the uncertainty, but there was something else too, a quiet strength that hadn't been there before. She wasn't alone in this. The thought gave her a sense of peace, a spark of courage she hadn't known she had. Maybe it was time to stop letting the world dictate her place. Maybe it was time to step out from the shadows. But Jada knew one thing for sure. She couldn't do it alone. And with Maria by her side, maybe, just maybe, they could start something that could finally make a difference. The following week, Jada's routine remained the same. The customers still came and went, their laughter and chatter filling the space between the soft clink of plates and silverware. But Jada's every step felt heavier, as though the weight of her frustration was growing with every passing day. The man from the other day, the one who had taunted her, was never far from her thoughts. His words still echoed in her head, a reminder how easily people like him could dismiss her. She had tried to shake it off, to act like it was just another unpleasant customer. But she knew better now. That encounter had opened something in her, a small crack in the wall she had built around her feelings. The next few days passed in a blur of familiar faces, but the atmosphere in the restaurant was different now. There was a palpable tension in the air, and Jada found herself growing more impatient with every passing minute. The way the customers spoke to her, the way they looked past her, it all felt suffocating. It wasn't just the casual racism. It was the expectation that she would take it without question, without complaint. And then, of course, he came back. The man in the navy suit. The one who had made her feel small and insignificant. He walked in with a smug grin on his face, his eyes scanning the room before settling on her. He was sitting alone this time, which somehow felt even worse. He wasn't with a group, where his cruelty could be disguised in the noise of the crowd. No, today he was going to be the center of attention, and she would have no choice but to deal with him. "Hey, sweetheart," he called out to her as she walked past his table. His voice was condescending, as though he were talking to a child. "It's about time you showed up. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten about me." Jada forced a smile and turned to face him. "Sorry about that, sir. What can I get you today?" He leaned back in his chair, stretching his legs out under the table, making no effort to hide his obvious disdain for her. "I'll have the usual," he said, as though he had some right to dictate her actions. She nodded, her professional smile in place, but inside, a storm was brewing. She could feel the old anger stirring, the familiar ache of being treated like she was less than human. It wasn't just him. It wasn't just today. It was every day. The endless parade of people who thought they could mock her, dismiss her, and walk away without any consequences. As she walked to the kitchen, the words he had said replayed in her head like a broken record. "People like you will be grateful for whatever they get." His casual disregard for her humanity was like a punch to the gut. But now, Jada felt something shift. This time, she didn't want to just smile and walk away. This time, she didn't want to let it slide. She returned to his table, holding the plate of food she had prepared with precision, but as she set it down in front of him, she could feel her resolve hardening. The way he looked up at her, the glint of superiority in his eyes, it was all too much. And this time, she wasn't going to play along. "Is everything to your liking, so?" she asked, her voice still steady, but with a hint of something else, something he wasn't used to hearing from someone like her. He looked up at her, surprised for a brief moment, then smirked. "I don't know. Is it? Maybe I'll need a little more than this. You know, I like my food served with a little more respect. You might want to work on that." Jada felt the anger welling up inside her, but she kept her face neutral. She had reached her breaking point. He had crossed the line, but she wasn't going to let him have the satisfaction of seeing her crack. Instead, she turned to leave, but before she could take a step, she stopped. "You know," she said quietly, her voice steady but with an edge, "I've been doing this job for years, and every day I put up with the same thing. People like you who think they can talk down to me, who think I'm here to entertain them or make them feel better about themselves. You're not special. You're just another customer with an inflated sense of importance." His jaw dropped slightly, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something, surprise, maybe even fear, cross his face. But it was too late for him to backpedal. Jada wasn't going to let him make excuses. She wasn't going to be the silent, invisible woman behind the counter anymore. "I'm not your servant, and I'm not going to pretend like I'm grateful for your attention," she continued, her voice growing more confident with each word. "You don't get to treat me like I'm beneath you just because you think you can." There was a long pause, and Jada could feel her heart racing in her chest, her hands trembling slightly. But she didn't back down. She kept her eyes locked on his, waiting for him to respond. She didn't know what she was expecting, an apology, maybe, but instead, his expression hardened, and he sat up straighter in his chair. "You really think you can talk to me like that?" he asked, his voice low and filled with venom. "I do," Jada said, her voice unwavering. "And if you don't like it, you can take your business elsewhere." The silence in the restaurant was deafening. Jada felt every pair of eyes in the room on her, but she didn't care. She had said what she needed to say. For once, she wasn't going to apologize for standing up for herself. She wasn't going to let him get away with it. Without waiting for him to respond, Jada turned and walked away, her heart pounding in her chest. The weight of the moment hung in the air like a storm cloud, but she didn't feel regret. For the first time in a long time, she felt a spark of power, something she hadn't felt in years. She had taken control of the situation, and in that moment, she knew that she wasn't going to let anyone push her down again. Jada's feet carried her back to the kitchen, and as she entered, the sound of sizzling pans and clinking utensils seemed to swallow the memory of the confrontation. She set the dirty plate down on the counter and wiped her hands with a rag, trying to ignore the rushing adrenaline that still coursed through her veins. It wasn't that she was afraid, but the reality of what she had just done, the audacity of standing up to him, of speaking her truth, was overwhelming. Her chest felt tight, and her heart pounded loudly in her ears. The confrontation hadn't gone as she had expected. She hadn't known what she would say or how he would respond, but the silence that followed her words was something she hadn't anticipated. She could still see his face, the confusion, the shock, the brief flicker of fear. It was as though she had broken some invisible rule by simply daring to exist as something more than a server. But the words were out now, and there was no taking them back. She had made her stand, and as uncomfortable as the moment had been, she didn't regret it. Not entirely. She took a deep breath and turned toward the sink, trying to calm her racing thoughts. As she scrubbed the dish in front of her, her mind kept wandering back to his face, to the moment when his superiority faltered. Just for a second. Was it fear she saw? No, it was something deeper, something that made him realize that for once he wasn't in control. And for Jada, that feeling was like a lifeline. Jada. She turned to see Maria standing in the doorway, her face full of concern. She had been watching the interaction from the corner of the room, though Jada hadn't noticed until now. Her presence was a silent comfort. Maria had always been there, witnessing the microaggressions, the backhanded compliments, the barely concealed disdain that customers had for Jada. But today, she had seen Jada stand up for herself. And something in her expression now was different. Respect, maybe even admiration. "You okay?" Maria asked again, her voice quieter now, as if not wanting to break the fragile peace between them. Jada forced a smile, though it felt tight. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just not used to saying things like that." Maria stepped closer, her eyes scanning Jada's face. She didn't push further, but there was a knowing in her gaze, a silent understanding of the weight of what had just happened. "I'm proud of you, Jada," she said softly. "I've seen you take this crap for so long. You stood up for yourself today. That takes guts." Jada's heart clenched at the words. She didn't know why it hit her so hard, maybe because she had never seen herself as someone who could inspire anything other than a soft sigh of annoyance or pity. But today was different. Today, she had stepped into the light, and for the first time, she could see the outlines of her own strength. "I don't know what's going to happen next," Jada said quietly, her hand still gripping the edges of the sink. "But I couldn't let him walk all over me anymore. I couldn't let him get away with it." Maria nodded, her expression somber. "I get it. It's exhausting, isn't it? Trying to be invisible so they don't feel uncomfortable. Trying to just survive. I think today you showed everyone, that you're not just some invisible worker. You're here." Jada's throat tightened at Maria's words, and she tried to blink away the emotions threatening to overwhelm her. It wasn't that she was weak. It was that she had spent so long hiding, holding back, trying to keep the peace at the cost of her own dignity. Now, Maria's words made her feel like she had finally earned the right to be seen. "I'm just tired of pretending," Jada said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm tired of being the nice, quiet one who just takes it." Maria's eyes softened as she placed a hand on Jada's shoulder, a gesture of solidarity. "You don't have to pretend anymore. We all see you. Jada, we've always seen you." Jada smiled, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. But even as she felt this sense of validation, there was still a gnawing feeling in the pit of her stomach. What now? What happened after the confrontation? Would the customer complain? Would she be punished for stepping out of line? The sound of a door opening in the front of the restaurant broke her thoughts. The same customer, the man in the navy suit, was getting up from his seat, preparing to leave. He paused briefly at the counter, and his eyes flickered in Jada's direction. His earlier bravado was gone now, replaced with something that looked almost uncertain. Jada straightened her back, feeling the fire inside her again. She was ready, whatever happened next. He walked past the kitchen entrance, and for a split second, he glanced at her with a mix of frustration and disbelief. She met his gaze without flinching, her posture firm, her expression steady. He didn't say a word. He just walked out, his footsteps fading as he left the restaurant. Jada let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. It was over, at least for now, but something inside her had changed. She had stood up for herself, and he had walked away. Maybe he didn't understand why she had said what she said. Maybe he never would. But that didn't matter. She had taken a stand, and that was the first step in something bigger. "You're going to be okay, Jada," Maria said, breaking the silence. "You did good." Jada nodded, her heart still racing but filled with something new, something powerful. "Yeah, I did." For the first time in a long time, she believed it. The days that followed felt like a slow, steady build-up to something inevitable. Jada didn't know what was coming next. The restaurant seemed to carry a quiet tension, as though everyone was waiting for the fallout from her confrontation with the customer. She kept her head down, working like usual, but there was a new weight to every step she took. She wasn't sure if it was the echoes of her words or the uncertain gaze of her coworkers, but it was there. It didn't take long for the news to spread. It wasn't just the regulars who noticed Jada's confrontation. The kitchen staff heard about it. The servers, even the janitors seemed to know. Some of them offered quiet nods of approval. A few murmured congratulations. But there were others, like Mr. Watkins, the manager, who were less than thrilled. Jada could feel the change as soon as she walked into work that day. Mr. Watkins wasn't his usual jovial self. There was something off about his demeanor, a stiffness in his movements. He avoided making eye contact with her, busying himself behind the counter, shuffling papers like he was trying to appear preoccupied. It wasn't long before he called her into the back office. "Jada," Mr. Watkins said, his tone sharp and professional, but there was an edge to it. "Can I have a word with you?" Her stomach twisted, but she followed him into the small office anyway. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed, casting a cold, clinical light over the room. Mr. Watkins closed the door behind them, the click of the latch echoing in the otherwise silent space. "I've been hearing some things," he started, standing behind his desk, his hands flat against the surface. "About what happened with that customer the other day." Jada tried to steady her breath, her hands clasped in front of her. "I don't know what you've heard, but I said what I needed to say." "I know what you said, Jada." Mr. Watkins cut her off. His face was unreadable, his lips pressed into a thin line. "And I'm going to be honest with you. That wasn't okay. We don't talk to customers like that, especially not ones who have been coming here for years and spend a lot of money." Jada's heart sank. She had known this was coming. She had known that standing up to the customer would come with consequences, but hearing it from Mr. Watkins made it feel so much more real. The words hit harder than she anticipated. "I didn't disrespect him," Jada said, her voice tight but steady. "I just spoke up. For once, I stood up for myself. He insulted me. He insulted my work. He made me feel less than him for no reason other than the fact that I was doing my job. I'm not going to apologize for that." "I'm not asking you to apologize, Jada," Mr. Watkins replied, his voice a little softer now, but still firm. "But you have to understand that this kind of behavior reflects badly on the restaurant. You can't afford to make a scene like that. Not with customers who bring in as much business as he does. You might think he did the right thing, but it's causing problems." Jada could feel her chest tightening with every word he spoke. The man had made her feel small and insignificant, and now the restaurant was siding with him. The weight of the unfairness felt suffocating. "I get it, Mr. Watkins," she said, her voice cold. "You're worried about the business, but I'm worried about my dignity. I'm not here to be treated like a servant, like I'm invisible. That's not why I come in every day." There was a long pause, the air thick with tension. Mr. Watkins ran a hand through his hair and sighed. "Look, Jada, I don't want to lose you, but you need to understand how these things work. We're in the service industry. We can't afford to alienate customers, especially ones like him. This isn't personal. It's about keeping things running smoothly." The words felt like a slap in the face. She had spent so long pretending that her dignity didn't matter, that being treated like a piece of furniture was just part of the job. But now, standing there in front of him, she realized just how much she had allowed herself to be diminished. And she was done. "You're right," she said, her voice steady. "I understand. I won't do it again." Mr. Watkins's expression softened slightly, but he didn't look relieved. He was still the manager, still looking at her as an employee who had stepped out of line. "Good. I'm glad we're on the same page." But Jada didn't feel relief. She didn't feel anything but disappointment, not just in Mr. Watkins, but in herself. She had stood up for what she believed in, and it had cost her. Again, she was just another waitress in a system built to break people like her, and there was nothing she could do to change that. As she walked out of the office, she caught Maria's eye. Her friend looked at her, concern written on her face, but Jada didn't want to talk about it. Not yet. The conversation with Mr. Watkins left a bitter taste in her mouth. He hadn't told her she was wrong, but he had made it clear that standing up for herself came at a cost, and it was a cost Jada wasn't sure she was willing to pay. But as she returned to her section, the weight of that conversation still pressing on her, she realized something. She was going to have to make a choice. She could keep her head down, keep smiling and swallowing the insults, and keep living in fear of upsetting the fragile balance that was her life at this restaurant. Or she could find another way, one that didn't involve sacrificing her self-respect for the sake of a paycheck. She wasn't sure what that way would be yet, but she knew one thing. She wasn't going to be quiet anymore. Not for them. Not for anyone. The days following her conversation with Mr. Watkins felt like a tightrope walk. Jada went through the motions of her work, her actions automatic, her smile fixed in place. The restaurant was busy, but she barely noticed the customers anymore. The only thing that occupied her mind was the thought of what had happened and what was still to come. She had tried to do the right thing. She had stood up for herself, for her dignity, even though the world around her seemed determined to silence her. The conversation with Mr. Watkins had been a stark reminder of the realities of her life, of the unspoken rules that governed this world. You were meant to be invisible, to smile, to endure. But Jada couldn't do that anymore. It had taken everything she had to speak out, and now she felt more exhausted than ever. Her feet ached from the long hours, and her head throbbed with the constant hum of the fluorescent lights above her. The same feeling of being trapped crept back in. She had thought standing up for herself would feel like a victory, but instead, it felt like she was walking deep into a cage of her own making. The breaking point came when the man in the navy suit returned for his weekly visit. He walked in with his usual air of arrogance, scanning the room before his eyes landed on her. Jada's heart skipped a beat, but she forced herself to stay calm. She wouldn't let him see her sweat. She wouldn't let him have that power over her again. But this time, he didn't just sit down and wait for his usual order. He motioned for her to come over, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. But there was something different in the way he looked at her now. It was almost predatory. "You know, I was thinking about what you said last time," he said, the words dripping with condescension. "I think I may have been a little too harsh with you, but I don't think you quite understand your place here." Jada felt a familiar rush of anger flare up, but she pushed it down, forcing her voice to stay steady. "I understand my job, sir. I'm here to take your order and ensure you have a pleasant dining experience." He chuckled darkly. No, that's not quite what I meant. I meant that you're here to serve me, and you're doing a pretty poor job of it. You've got an attitude problem. And let me tell you, attitudes don't get you far in places like this." Jada felt her hands tremble slightly, but she clenched them into fists, determined not to show any weakness. She had to stay calm. This wasn't about him. This was about her, about how much she had taken and how much longer she was willing to put up with it. "You don't know anything about me," Jada said, her voice quiet but firm. "You don't know what I've been through or what I've had to put up with just to get through a single day in this job, but I'm done pretending. You don't get to treat me like I'm beneath you anymore." The words were out before she could stop them, but there was a sense of relief that followed. Relief and fear. She had crossed the line. There was no going back now. The man's smile faltered for a moment, his brow furrowing as he looked at her. It wasn't the smug expression she was used to seeing. It was something different. Disbelief, maybe even a hint of discomfort. For the first time since she'd started working here, Jada felt like she was looking at him not as a customer, but as a person who had finally been confronted with the reality of his actions. He didn't respond immediately. For a long moment, the air between them was thick with unspoken tension. Then, just as Jada thought he might apologize, or at least acknowledge the weight of her words, he leaned back in his chair and shook his head, dismissing her with a casual flick of his wrist. "You really think you can talk to me like that?" he sneered. "You're nothing, just a waitress, and you'll be nothing if you keep acting like this." The words hit her like a slap, and for a moment, she felt the urge to turn and walk away, to hide, to just pretend it had never happened. But then, something inside her snapped. "I'm not nothing," she said, her voice stronger now, the words coming faster. "I'm a person, and I'm tired of being treated like I'm invisible, tired of being looked down on. You don't get to talk to me like that anymore. Not ever again." The man stared at her for a moment, and then, as if he had seen enough, he grabbed his coat and stood up, throwing a wad of cash onto the table. "You'll regret this," he said, his voice low, threatening. But there was a tremor in it now, a slight crack that Jada didn't miss. He walked out of the restaurant, his footsteps loud and forceful. Jada stood there, frozen for a moment, trying to steady her breath. The confrontation had left her shaken, but in the pit of her stomach, there was something else, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Power. She had stood up to him. She had faced him down, not with anger, but with the unshakable truth of her own worth. And for once, she felt like she had won. Not because he was gone, but because she had refused to let him break her. The silence in the room was deafening. The other customers seemed to pretend nothing had happened, continuing their meals as though the disturbance had been nothing more than a passing breeze. But Jada knew better. She had spoken up. She had taken control. And now, she didn't know what would happen next. Would she lose her job? Would she be forced to apologize for standing up for herself? The uncertainty gnawed at her, but there was something else bubbling to the surface now. Something stronger than fear. She wasn't backing down. Not anymore. The following day felt like the calm before the storm. Jada arrived at the restaurant, her step slow but deliberate. Her mind was a whirlwind, a mixture of uncertainty and an unshakable sense of resolve. She had no idea what would happen next, no idea if there would be consequences for her outbursts. But for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was drowning in the weight of her own silence. Maria was the first to approach her when she walked in. Her expression was cautious, but there was a flicker of something else. Support? Maybe? Jada could see that Maria had heard about the incident with the customer, but she didn't know what to say. "You okay?" Maria asked, her voice quiet, as if unsure whether to speak freely. Jada nodded. "Yeah, I'm good. I did what I had to do." Maria studied her for a moment before nodding. "I heard what happened. I think you did the right thing. Jada, he had no right to talk to you like that. But do you think there will be any fallout? For you, I mean." Jada's chest tightened to the question, but she forced herself to remain calm. "I don't know. I think I've made my point. And if that costs me my job, then maybe it's time for me to leave. I've been putting up with enough." Maria hesitated before speaking again. "I'll back you up. You know that, right? If it comes to something, I'll be here. I'll help however I can." Her words hit Jada harder than she expected. It felt like a lifeline, a reminder that, despite everything, she wasn't alone. But Jada didn't have time to dwell on the conversation, as Mr. Watkins appeared in the doorway, his face tense and serious. He motioned for Jada to join him in the back office. Her stomach sank as she followed him, her pulse quickening. She didn't know what he would say. She didn't know if this was the moment everything would come crashing down. The office door closed behind her, and she stood there, trying to brace herself for whatever was coming. Mr. Watkins stood behind his desk, his expression unreadable. "Jada," he began, his voice measured, "I'm not going to sugarcoat this. I've had a conversation with the customer you spoke to yesterday. He wasn't pleased with the way things went, and to be honest, neither am I." Jada's heart began to race. She braced herself for the worst, but she didn't flinch. She had already made up her mind. If she had to face the consequences, she would. "I'm not asking you to apologize for what you said, Mr. Watkins continued, surprising her. "What I'm asking is that you understand the importance of maintaining a professional atmosphere here. This place runs on its reputation, and I can't afford to lose customers over personal disagreements." Jada nodded, but her mind was swirling. "I understand," she said softly, her voice steady despite the anger that flared inside her. "But my dignity matters, Mr. Watkins. I've been disrespected by that man for the last time, and I'm not going to pretend like I don't matter anymore." There was a long pause. Mr. Watkins looked at her, his face a mixture of frustration and resignation. "Look, I get it. I do. But I'm not in a position to lose business over one incident. What I'm offering you is a chance to make things right. If you apologize to him, just a simple apology, things will settle down. We can put this behind us." Jada's breath caught in her throat. The words felt like a trap. He wasn't offering her a chance to speak out. He was asking her to back down, to do exactly what he had expected of her from the start. "I can't do that," she said, her voice growing firmer with every word. "I won't apologize for standing up for myself. I won't apologize for not letting him walk all over me. If that's what you need from me to keep my job, then maybe I need to rethink my place here." Mr. Watkins stared at her for a long moment. Then he sighed deeply, rubbing his temple as though the conversation were wearing him thin. "I'm not going to force you to apologize, Jada," he said finally, "but I need you to understand something. This job isn't just about your personal beliefs. It's about what's best for the business. I don't want to see you lose it over something like this." Jada's chest tightened. She could feel the weight of his words, but the fire inside her wouldn't die. She was tired of bending for others, tired of shrinking to make other people feel comfortable. "I'm not asking you to agree with me," Jada replied, her voice resolute. "But I won't be silent anymore. Not for this job. Not for anyone." Mr. Watkins didn't respond immediately. The silence between them stretched, thick and suffocating. Finally, he spoke again, his voice quieter, almost resigned. "I hope you know what you're doing, Jada," he said, looking down at the desk. "I hope you realize the risk you're taking. I really do. Because if you go down this path, there's no turning back." Jada didn't hesitate. She held his gaze with everything she had, the weight of a decision clear in her eyes. "I'm willing to take that risk," she said, her voice unwavering. "I'd rather lose my job than lose myself." There was no more to say after that. Mr. Watkins gave a sharp nod and left the room without another word. Jada stood there for a moment, feeling both the weight of the decision and the strange lightness that came with it. She had taken a stand, and whatever happened next, she knew she had done the right thing. Later that evening, when the last of the customers had left and the restaurant had quieted down, Jada checked her phone. She had received a message from Maria. "You did the right thing today. Whatever happens, you've got me." Jada smiled as she read the message, the words a reminder that she was not alone in this. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, she felt like she was on the right side of it. The following days were a blur of tension and quiet uncertainty. Jada arrived at work each morning, trying to shake off the knot in her stomach, knowing that every shift could be her last. The weight of her confrontation with Mr. Watkins hung in the air, but she refused to let it defeat her. Every time she walked into the restaurant, she reminded herself that she had chosen this path, that her dignity mattered more than the job. Maria was a constant source of comfort. She had been a silent ally, standing by Jada's side without hesitation. Whenever they had a quiet moment, Maria would pull Jada aside and ask how she was holding up. But the truth was, Jada had never felt more alive. She was standing up for herself, no longer allowing others to define her worth. It was a feeling that filled her with both pride and fear. Then, the call came. It was from a local advocacy group focused on racial justice in the workplace. They had heard about her stand against the customer and wanted to know if she would be willing to speak with them about her experience. At first, Jada had thought it was a prank, a joke. But when they explained who they were and what they were doing, fighting for fair treatment for workers facing discrimination, Jada felt a spark of hope ignite within her. She agreed to meet with them. The meeting was held in a small community center on the edge of town, the kind of place that didn't look like much from the outside but felt like a sanctuary once you stepped inside. The walls were lined with posters about workers' rights, photographs of protests, and flyers for local events. Jada could feel the weight of it all, the decades of struggle, the fight for dignity and respect. And she realized, as she sat across from the group of organizers, that she wasn't just a passive observer anymore. She was part of something bigger. They told us about your experience. One of the organizers, a woman named Veronica, said with a smile, "We think your voice could make a difference. We're trying to amplify stories like yours, stories of workers who have had enough and are willing to stand up for what's right. We believe your story can help others find their own strength." Jada sat quietly for a moment, letting the words sink in. For so long, she had felt invisible, like her voice didn't matter, like the struggle wasn't worth it. But now, hearing someone else say it, hearing someone else recognize her struggle, made her feel like she wasn't alone. She was part of a movement that could change things. "I don't know if I'm ready for all this," Jada said, her voice uncertain. "What if people don't listen? What if I lose everything?" Veronica leaned forward, her eyes intense with conviction. "It's not about what you have to lose, Jada. It's about what you can give. You've already shown incredible courage by speaking up. This is just the beginning. You've already taken the first step by sharing your truth, and now you have the power to help others do the same." Jada felt the weight of her decision settling in her chest, but it was a different weight now. It wasn't fear. It was purpose. "I'll do it," she said, her voice growing stronger. "I'll speak out." The organizers smiled, exchanging looks of approval. "You're not alone in this," Veronica said. "We'll help you. We'll make sure your voice is heard." Jada left the meeting that afternoon feeling a sense of clarity she hadn't had in years. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for all the workers who had been silenced, for all the people who had endured what she had endured but had never found the strength to speak up. When she returned to the restaurant that evening, it was with a newfound sense of purpose. She didn't know how things would unfold. She didn't know what the future held. But she knew one thing. She wasn't going to back down. Not for the job. Not for anyone. She found Maria in the break room, sitting at the table, scrolling through her phone. When Jada walked in, Maria looked up and gave her a small smile. "How did it go?" she asked, her voice full of concern. "It went well," Jada said, sitting down beside her. "They want me to speak out, to share my story. They think it could make a difference." Maria's eyes lit up with surprise, then softened with pride. "Jada, that's amazing. I'm so proud of you. You're going to change things. I just know it." Jada smiled, the weight of her decision feeling lighter now. "I don't know what will happen next, but I can't stay quiet anymore. I can't keep pretending everything is fine when it's not." Maria nodded. "You're right, and I'm right here with you. Whatever happens, I've got your back." Jada's heart swelled with gratitude. She had made the right decision. She wasn't alone, and this was just the beginning. That night, as Jada lay in bed, she couldn't help but think of the path ahead. She wasn't sure how long it would take, or how hard it would be, but she knew she was no longer afraid. Her voice had power, and for the first time in her life, she was going to use it. In the weeks that followed, Jada's life began to change in ways she hadn't expected. The story of her confrontation at the restaurant began to spread, first through word of mouth, then through social media, and eventually local news outlets picked up the story. The coverage was mixed. Some applauded her bravery in speaking out against the abuse, while others criticized her for making a scene and alienating customers. But despite the criticisms, Jada's resolve remained unwavering. She worked fewer shifts at the restaurant, having been called in for interviews and to speak at local community meetings. The advocacy group she had connected with was putting her in touch with other workers who had experienced similar discrimination, and Jada found herself at the forefront of a movement she never imagined she'd be part of. One evening, as she prepared for yet another interview, Jada sat with Maria in the break room. Maria had become more than just a co-worker. She was a friend, a support system, and someone who had been by her side every step of the way. "You're really doing this," Maria said, a note of awe in her voice as she watched Jada pull on her jacket. "You're standing up and making people listen." Jada met her friend's gaze and smiled, though the weight of it all had started to settle in her bones. "I guess I am. I'm not sure what's next, but I can't go back to being silent. Not after everything I've learned." Maria nodded, her expression thoughtful. I know it's scary, but I think you're inspiring people. There are so many workers who feel like they don't have a voice. And now, they're seeing that they can speak up. You started something, Jada, something bigger than just your job. Jada's heart swelled at Maria's words. For the first time, she understood the impact of what she had done. It wasn't just about her. It wasn't just about that one encounter with a customer. It was about the system, the unspoken rules of silence, of endurance, of invisibility. She had broken that silence, and in doing so, had given others permission to do the same. Later that evening, she walked into the diner for her shift, feeling a sense of weightlessness. The restaurant had become a strange place for her now. It wasn't just a place she worked. It was a battleground, a place where she had fought for her dignity and was now watching others shift in their seats as they felt the ripple effect of her actions. When Jada entered the kitchen, the staff exchanged glances, some of them offering small nods of approval. The uncomfortable tension of the past few weeks was still there, but something had changed. She had taken control, and the restaurant was no longer a place where she could be silenced. The manager, Mr. Watkins, didn't look at her the same way anymore. There was no reprimand, no harsh words. His gaze was almost neutral now, like he was waiting for her to make the next move, not sure what to do with someone who had decided to no longer play by the unspoken rules. Jada took a deep breath as she clocked in, feeling the same sense of empowerment she had felt after her confrontation with that customer. She hadn't backed down. She had stood tall, even when the world told her to shrink, and it had changed everything. That night, as she served customers, there was an unusual calm in the air. People still came and went, but there was something quieter about it all, as though they were all subtly aware of the power dynamics at play. Jada didn't care about the judgment anymore. She didn't care if she was liked or disliked. She was here to do her job, and she was going to do it with her head held high. As she walked back to the kitchen during a break, Maria caught up with her. "I saw that interview you did this morning," Maria said, grinning. "You were amazing. Seriously, you sounded like you've been doing this for years." Jada smiled, the exhaustion of the day catching up with her, but still feeling lighter than she had in ages. "I was nervous. Still am, actually, but it feels good to finally be heard. You know, Maria, I think we can really make a difference. I think the things we're dealing with, they can change. If we speak out enough, if enough people start listening." Maria's eyes softened. "I believe that. I really do. You've already started something here. Jada, you've already changed things." Jada nodded, the weight of Maria's words sinking in. "I didn't know if it was worth it. I didn't know if anything would change. But now I see it. Every time someone steps up, it gets harder for them to ignore us. We're changing the narrative. We're not invisible anymore." The words lingered in the air as they both stood in the quiet break room. Jada's heart felt full in a way she hadn't expected, like she had found her place, her purpose, not just in the fight for justice but in the power of solidarity. She wasn't alone in this anymore. There was a whole community of workers, activists, and everyday people who were all fighting for the same thing, dignity. As the night wound down and her shift came to an end, Jada realized that she didn't need to have all the answers. She didn't need to know exactly how things would unfold. What mattered was that she had taken that first step, and with it, she had opened the door for others to do the same. Jada left the diner that night with a sense of fulfillment she had never known. It wasn't about being perfect or having everything figured out. It was about being true to herself, being brave enough to demand the respect she deserved. And for the first time, she knew she wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for everyone who had ever been made to feel invisible.